The open ocean was once the ultimate barrier. To cross it demanded more than bravery. It required a deep and quiet genius. This is the story of that genius, a chronicle of 20 specific engineering breakthroughs that made ancient ocean travel possible. We will explore the precise innovations that transformed hollowed logs into vessels capable of traversing vast and unknown seas, enabling the trade, migration, and cultural exchange that shaped our world. You will discover how solutions crafted millennia ago, from the hull beneath the water to the stars above, established principles of naval architecture and navigation that remain vital even today. What ingenious method allowed a simple raft to defy the might of the Pacific swell, and how could a triangle of cloth let a ship sail almost directly into the wind? By the end, you will see the open sea not as an empty void, but as a canvas of ancient engineering, solved in stunningly sophisticated ways by cultures who never met. When you think of human innovation, how far back does your mind truly travel? The first breakthrough was not about moving across the water, but about shaping the vessel that would hold you there. It began with the simplest of forms, a tree trunk hollowed by fire and stone. This dugout canoe was a profound step, but it was bound by nature's dimensions, limited to the size and shape of a single log. True ocean travel demanded something larger, more resilient, and more adaptable. The revolutionary leap came when ancient shipwrights stopped carving boats from solid wood and started building them from shaped planks. This shift from subtraction to assembly changed everything. Now a hull could be wider, deeper, and far stronger than any single tree could provide. The key to this new strength was the keel, a long, central timber running the length of the ship's bottom. Think of it as the vessel's spine, a rigid backbone that gave the entire structure its longitudinal strength and, crucially, its directional stability in the water. Without a proper keel, a ship is just a basket on the waves, easily pushed sideways by wind and current. With it, the hull gains purpose and a defined path forward. Different cultures solved this puzzle in brilliant ways. The ancient Egyptians, for instance, built their majestic ships for voyages to the land of Punt by lashing planks together with thick ropes, creating a flexible hull that could absorb the stress of the Nile and the Red Sea. Far to the north, Nordic shipbuilders developed the clinker method, overlapping planks like scales on a fish and riveting them together, producing vessels that were both lightweight and incredibly seaworthy in the rough North Atlantic. Each solution was an answer to a specific environment, but they all shared one foundational truth. Every technology that followed, every sail and every steering oar, relied entirely on this first fundamental invention, the engineered hull. With a strong hull beneath them, ancient mariners faced their next great challenge, the wind itself. For centuries, oars provided the only reliable propulsion, a brutal and limiting equation of human labor for distance gained. The invention of the sail changed that equation forever, transforming the wind from a chaotic force of nature into a predictable engine. The earliest sails were simple squares of woven cloth, hung from a single mast to catch a following breeze. This was revolutionary, but it was also a one-way ticket. You went where the wind blew you. True ocean mastery required not just moving with the wind, but moving against it. This led to the second great leap in sail technology, the development of the fore and aft rig. Unlike a square sail that pushes a ship from behind, a fore and aft sail, like the iconic lateen sail used across the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean, is mounted along the length of the ship. This triangular shape acts like an airfoil, generating lift and allowing a vessel to sail at an angle into the wind, a technique called tacking. Suddenly, the world opened up. A ship was no longer a slave to prevailing winds. It could navigate, it could maneuver, it could return home from across the sea. We see this engineering brilliance in two legendary vessels. The Phoenicians, master traders of the ancient Mediterranean, used broad-beamed ships with large square sails for stable, cargo-heavy voyages across open water. Meanwhile, the Arab dhow, with its graceful lateen rig, became the agile workhorse of the Indian Ocean, capable of intricate coastal sailing and long-distance trade, riding the monsoon winds to India and beyond. The sail did not just harness the wind, it harnessed human ambition, turning the ocean from a barrier into a highway. But a ship with a sail is still only half a vessel. Imagine trying to guide a powerful horse with only a loose rope. You have the speed, but you lack all command. For ancient mariners, that rope was the steering oar, a long, heavy paddle lashed to the side of the ship near the stern. It worked after a fashion, but it was a constant struggle. In rough seas, the force of the water could wrench the oar from the helmsman's grip, and controlling a large, laden ship required immense physical strength. The true breakthrough in control came with a deceptively simple pivot, moving the steering mechanism from the side of the ship to its very center line. This was the invention of the Stern-Post Rudder, a vertical blade attached directly to the back of the keel with sturdy iron hinges. The difference was not just one of placement, but of fundamental physics. A steering oar pulls the stern sideways through the water, a crude and inefficient motion. A central rudder, however, works like a door on a hinge, deflecting the flow of water to create a smooth, powerful turning force directly at the ship's pivot point. The mechanical advantage was immense. A single helmsman could now steer a vessel many times larger than before, with precision and far less effort, even in storm-tossed waves. This innovation appears to have been developed independently in two key regions. In China, by at least the 1st century, shipwrights were using balanced rudders that could be raised and lowered in well decks, a brilliant feature for navigating both deep rivers and coastal shallows. Centuries later, around the 12th century, northern European cog ships began featuring the fixed stern-post rudder, a design that would define the age of exploration. Why was this control so vital? Because it transformed the captain's intent into the ship's immediate action. To navigate a narrow channel, to tack efficiently against the wind, to hold a steady course through a long night, all of it depended on this single, sturdy piece of engineered wood. The rudder did not just steer the ship, it steered history, enabling the larger, more reliable vessels that would eventually connect continents. Even with a strong hull and a steady rudder, a wooden ship faces a silent, relentless enemy, the sea itself. Water will find every weakness, every hairline gap between planks, and seep in until the vessel becomes its own grave. For ancient shipwrights, the battle for buoyancy was fought not just in grand designs, but in the meticulous, sticky work of sealing a ship from the inside out. This was the art of waterproofing, a seemingly humble craft that meant the difference between a successful voyage and a catastrophic failure far from shore. Primary defense was caulking, the process of driving soft, fibrous material into the seams between hull planks. Across the ancient world, shipyards became workshops of improvisation. Nordic builders used tar-soaked animal hair or wool. In the Mediterranean, they packed seams with crushed flax or hemp fibers, then sealed them with hot pitch, a thick, black resin from pine trees. This created a flexible, watertight gasket that could swell when wet, tightening the seal even further. But caulking alone was not enough for the longest journeys, especially in warm waters teeming with shipworms, mollusks that could riddle a wooden hull like termites in a matter of months. The Romans engineered a brilliant, if labor-intensive, solution hull sheathing. They would nail thin sheets of lead over the entire underwater hull, covering the caulked seams. This lead armor made the ship heavier. but it created an impenetrable barrier against both worms and the clinging growth that could slow a vessel to a crawl. Other cultures used different shields. The Chinese sometimes applied layers of oil-soaked cloth and lacquer, while Pacific Islanders used specialized resins from local trees. This constant maintenance was not a one-time task, it was a ritual of survival. Before every major voyage, crews would careen their ships, hauling them onto a beach at high tide to lean on their sides as the water receded, exposing the hull for inspection, repair, and recaulking. The smell of hot pitch and the sight of workers patiently hammering fibers into wood represented a profound truth. The grand adventure of ocean travel was built, quite literally, upon these layers of sticky, unglamorous diligence. A ship could be beautifully designed and powerfully rigged, but without this hidden shield, it was just a carefully crafted container for the ocean it sought to conquer. A single mast and sail offered freedom, but it also imposed a strict limit. The physics were simple and unforgiving. A bigger sail catches more wind, but it also places tremendous strain on a single point of the hull, threatening to tear the ship apart in a strong gust. To sail further, to carry more, to venture into the open ocean's unpredictable winds, required a more elegant distribution of power. The solution was not to build one giant wing, but to spread many smaller ones across the length of the ship. This was the engineering revolution of multiple masts and the sophisticated rigging to control them. Adding a second mast and later a third transformed a vessel's relationship with the wind. Each mast carried its own sail, spreading the driving force along the keel and dramatically increasing the total sail area without overloading any single structural point. A ship could now carry the equivalent of a massive sail, but in a balanced, manageable form. This was not just about adding power, it was about creating options. Different sails could be set or reefed independently, allowing a crew to fine-tune their vessel's performance for changing conditions, balancing speed with stability. But all this new canvas would be useless, even dangerous, without a way to control it. The true genius lay in the intricate web of ropes known as the rigging. Standing rigging, the fixed lines of tarred hemp or later wire, held the masts upright against the constant pull of the sails. Running rigging, a dynamic network of lines threaded through wooden blocks or pulleys, gave a small crew miraculous mechanical advantage. A handful of sailors could now raise, lower, or adjust enormous sails that would otherwise require the strength of dozens. We see this mastery in two brilliant and distinct applications. The massive Chinese junks of the Ming Dynasty, like those of Admiral Zheng, his treasure fleet, were marvels of multi-masted engineering. With their tall lug sails stiffened by bamboo battens, they could be reefed with astonishing speed, and their complex rigging allowed them to sail efficiently on any point of wind. Meanwhile, in the vast Pacific, Polynesian voyagers achieved a different kind of balance with their double-hulled catamarans. By using two narrow hulls connected by a platform, they created a stable base that could support a powerful crab-claw sail on a single mast. Their rigging, crafted from woven coconut fiber, was a masterpiece of simplicity and strength, allowing them to harness the wind for journeys across thousands of miles of open ocean. Multiple masts and smart rigging did more than make ships faster, they made them smarter, turning raw wind into a precise and manageable force, one carefully adjusted line at a time. Yet even the most perfectly balanced sail rig is helpless if the vessel itself cannot stay upright. In the open Pacific, where swells can rise like rolling hills, a narrow, fast hull was essential for speed, but it was also a recipe for disaster, perpetually one strong gust away from flipping over. The solution crafted by Austronesian voyagers stands as one of the most elegantly simple and effective stability systems ever conceived, the Outrigger. Picture not a second full hull, but a single, slender log float, placed parallel to the main canoe and connected by 2 or more lateral beams. This arrangement creates a wide, buoyant base that resists the tipping force of the wind on the sail. When a gust pushes the main hull to lean, the outrigger float digs into the water on the opposite side, creating a powerful righting moment that pushes the entire assembly back to level. The engineering beauty lies in what it replaced. Unlike the deep, heavy keels of European ships, which created stability through ballast and deep draft, the outrigger provided immense stability without significant weight or depth. This meant Austronesian vessels could be incredibly light, fast, and shoal draft, able to sail quickly across deep ocean yet also glide over coral reefs to land on any beach. This was not a single design but a versatile principle. For shorter trips or calmer waters, a single outrigger sufficed. For the ultimate open ocean voyages, they developed the double-hulled canoe or catamaran, essentially using 2 full hulls as mutual outriggers, creating a stable platform large enough to carry families, livestock, and all the supplies needed for a one-way journey into the unknown. It was this innovation that powered the greatest human migration story across the open sea. Starting from island Southeast Asia, these navigators used outrigger vessels to consciously and systematically settle the Pacific, reaching islands separated by thousands of miles of empty ocean, from Hawaii to Rapa Nui to Aotearoa, New Zealand. They were not blown off course by accident, they sailed with purpose, their vessels engineered to be forgiving and stable in conditions that would swamp or capsize almost any other contemporary design. The outrigger did more than prevent a canoe from tipping. It provided the physical confidence that allowed generations to point their prows toward an empty horizon, trusting that their engineering would bring them and their future safely to a new shore. A hull built for stability in a calm river is a death trap on the open ocean. The difference lies not in the material, but in the shape, a subtle geometry of curves and angles engineered to dance with the waves rather than fight them. For a vessel meant for rivers or sheltered coasts, a flat or gently rounded bottom is ideal. It maximizes cargo space and allows it to float in very shallow water. But place that same barge in a deep ocean swell, and it will wallow helplessly, slamming into oncoming waves with a shudder that strains every joint. The open ocean demanded a hull that could cut and rise, a design that parted the water cleanly. This led to the development of the deep V-shaped hull, a form defined by its sharp angle from the keel upward, known as the deadrise. A hull with high deadrise acts like a knife, slicing through waves instead of pounding against them, providing a smoother, drier, and far safer ride. But cutting through water is only half the battle. A ship also needs to resist being pushed sideways by the wind, a force called leeway. This is where the keel's role expands beyond being a simple spine. In ocean-going vessels, the keel is often extended downward into a deeper fin, creating lateral resistance in the water to hold the ship on course, much like the centerboard on a modern sailboat. Another brilliant feature is hull flare, where the sides of the ship curve outward as they rise from the waterline. When a wave crashes against a flared hull, the shape deflects the water outward and away, preventing it from washing over the deck and helping the ship rise buoyantly to the crest. Nowhere is this adaptive engineering more brilliantly displayed than in the Viking longships. These were not just raiding vessels, they were masterpieces of multi-environment design. For ocean crossings, their long, slender hulls with a pronounced keel cut efficiently through North Atlantic swells, while their shallow draft and symmetrical ends allowed them to sail up rivers, beach directly on shore, and even be portaged over land. They could carry a crew across a stormy sea, then glide silently up a shallow creek for a surprise arrival. This was not a compromise, but a holistic understanding of hydrodynamics, where every curve served a dual purpose. The shape of a hull, therefore, was a language spoken in oak and pine, a direct conversation with the sea itself, declaring whether a ship was a prisoner of the coastline or a citizen of the deep. Yet a ship that can sail for 1,000 miles is useless if its crew cannot eat or drink for 100. The vessel itself was only the first part of the equation. The second was a self-contained world, a floating ecosystem of survival engineered for journeys where the next landfall was weeks away. This was the hidden architecture of storage and ballast, the logistics that turned a seaworthy hull into a sustainable home. Space was the most precious commodity on board, and every inch was designed with ruthless efficiency. Dedicated storage holds were built low in the ship, often below deck, to keep weight centered and cargo dry. Amphorae, those iconic ceramic jars with pointed bottoms, were not just pottery, they were brilliant modular storage units. Stood upright in sandy beds or special racks, their shape prevented rolling and allowed them to be packed tightly, holding wine, oil, grain, and fresh water. For truly long voyages, like those across the Indian Ocean or the vast Pacific, the challenge of fresh water was existential. Some ships carried massive ceramic tanks built into the hull itself, while others stored water in hollowed bamboo segments or sealed gourds. Food preservation became a high art. Grains, dried legumes, and hardtack, a nearly indestructible biscuit, formed the calorie backbone. Salted or smoked fish and meat provided protein, while some cultures carried live animals in small pens, a walking larder. But storing all these supplies created a new and dangerous problem. A ship loaded with food, water, and trade goods high in its hull becomes top-heavy, like a tall stack of boxes on a small cart, ready to tip at the first sharp turn. The engineering solution to this was ballast, the deliberate placement of dead weight low in the ship to lower its center of gravity. This was not random heavy stuff, it was a calculated counterbalance. Shipmasters would place smooth, heavy stones, bags of sand, or even less valuable bulk cargo like gravel or pig iron in the very bottom of the hold, beneath everything else. This ballast acted as a pendulum weight, making the ship inherently stable and resistant to heeling over from the force of the wind on its sails. The amount and placement were critical, adjusted carefully after observing how the ship sat in the water. Too little ballast and the ship was dangerously tender, too much, and it became a sluggish, wallowing beast, riding too low and vulnerable to waves. This logistical planning, this careful calculus of weight, volume, and human need, was as vital as the keel or the rudder. It transformed a ship from a mere vehicle into a portable fragment of homeland, carrying within its wooden ribs not just people, but the very possibility of their future. The successful voyage was measured not only in miles traversed, but in mouths fed and stability maintained, a silent testament to the engineers who thought as deeply about barrels and stones as they did about sails and stars. A ship could sail for weeks, but it needed a single, secure point of rest. For early mariners, the simple act of stopping was fraught with peril. A heavy stone tied to a rope would drag along the bottom, offering little more than a suggestion to a vessel caught in wind or current. In unfamiliar waters far from any friendly shore, this lack of a reliable brake could mean disaster, dashing a ship against rocks or stranding it on a hostile coast. The breakthrough came when the anchor ceased to be a weight and became a tool engineered to bite. This was the evolution from rounded stone to shaped metal, from dragging to digging in. The key was the fluke, those iconic, pointed arms designed to dig into the seabed, whether sand, mud, or clay. Once the flukes caught, the anchor's own pull would drive them deeper, creating a hold far stronger than its mere weight could provide. This principle reached a refined form with the Roman-style stock anchor. Crafted from iron, it featured the familiar two flukes, but added a crucial horizontal bar, the stock, set perpendicular to them at the top of the shank. When the anchor was dropped, this stock would cause one fluke to tip downward and dig in immediately, ensuring a fast, secure set. This design was so effective it set the template for anchors used well into the age of sail. The implications for exploration were profound. A reliable anchor transformed an unknown bay from a potential trap into a safe harbor. It allowed a ship to wait out an adverse wind, to pause for repairs, or to send a small boat ashore for fresh water and reconnaissance. It provided the flexibility to explore a coastline methodically, knowing you could stop almost anywhere with a reasonable bottom. For traders, it meant the ability to anchor offshore of a port without proper facilities, or to hold position in a crowded roadstead while waiting for a berth. This humble piece of forged iron, often overlooked next to grand sails and carved figureheads, was in fact a linchpin of maritime ambition. It represented not just the power to go, but the equally vital power to pause, to rest, and to choose the next move from a position of security. The anchor held the ship, and in doing so, it held the entire fragile enterprise of ocean travel together, granting sailors the precious gift of time and choice upon an indifferent sea. But a secure anchorage could only mark the end of a journey, not guide its beginning. To venture beyond the sight of land was to enter a realm without roads, where the only fixed points existed not on the water, but in the sky above. This demanded a different kind of engineering, one built not from wood or rope, but from observation, memory, and mathematics. The first global positioning system was written in starlight. Ancient navigators learned to read the heavens, understanding that the celestial bodies were not random sparks, but predictable guides. The most fundamental lesson was that the North Star, Polaris, hung almost directly above the Earth's North Pole. By measuring its angle above the horizon, a sailor could determine their latitude, their north-south position. At the equator, Polaris would sit right on the horizon at 0 degrees. As you sailed north, it would climb higher in the sky, 1 degree for every 60 nautical miles traveled. To make this measurement practical, cultures engineered simple, brilliant tools. Arab navigators in the Indian Ocean used the camel, a small rectangular board attached to a knotted string. Holding one knot in their teeth at a set distance, they would move the board closer or farther until its top edge aligned with Polaris and its bottom edge with the horizon. The knot where the string met their hand told them their latitude, a number they could compare to known coastal latitudes recorded on a wooden tablet. In the Mediterranean and later in Europe, navigators used the cross staff or astrolabe, devices with sliding pieces or rotating arms to measure the angle of the sun or a star with greater precision. Yet the most profound celestial navigation system required no physical tools at all, only the trained human mind. Polynesian voyagers navigating the vast Pacific memorized a mental star compass. They did not just know that a certain star rose in the east, they knew the precise point on the horizon where dozens of specific stars would rise and set, creating a star path or kavanga for each intended destination. As the night progressed and the Earth turned, they would simply shift their steering reference from one setting star to the next rising star on that same bearing, holding a course across thousands of miles as if following a celestial highway. They combined this with a deep knowledge of ocean swells, reading the refraction and interference patterns of waves to sense distant islands beyond the horizon. This intellectual architecture transformed the open ocean from a trackless void into a knowable, navigable space. It was engineering of the mind, turning the predictable clockwork of the cosmos into a living, usable map. The sailor with this knowledge was never truly lost, for they carried their coordinates within them, guided by a sky that was the same everywhere, and yet told them exactly where they were. The celestial map above was matched by a hidden one below the surface, a landscape of rising shoals and sudden drop-offs that could end a voyage in an instant. To sail confidently, especially near an unfamiliar coast, ancient mariners needed to see what lay beneath their keel. Their solution was brilliantly simple and profoundly effective: the sounding lead. This was not a complex instrument but a masterclass in practical engineering. A lead weight, often shaped like a bell or a pyramid, was attached to a long, marked line. A sailor would stand at the ship's side, swing the lead, and let it fly forward, allowing it to hit the seabed directly below as the ship glided over it. The marks on the line, often bits of cloth, leather, or different colored yarn tied at specific intervals, would tell him the depth instantly, but the lead's genius did not stop at measurement. The bottom of the weight was hollowed out and packed with tallow, a sticky animal fat. When the lead struck the bottom, it would bring up a sample, a tiny core of the seabed embedded in the grease. Pulling the line back up, the sailor would examine this sample like a detective at a crime scene. The tallow might be coated in fine gray mud, coarse yellow sand, broken white shells, or small black pebbles. Each substance was a clue. A veteran pilot, consulting his memory or a shared oral tradition, could interpret these clues. Shelly sand might indicate a specific bank near a known river mouth, while a particular dark mud could mean you were approaching a certain bay, even if the coastline was shrouded in fog. This practice, called arming the lead, transformed a simple depth gauge into a primitive but powerful form of seabed mapping and positional verification. It was a direct, tactile conversation with the ocean floor, a way to read the unseen terrain and confirm your place upon it when every other landmark had vanished into the haze. This constant, rhythmic act of heaving the lead and reading its message was a primary defense against the ever-present threat of running aground, turning the invisible into the known, 1 fathom at a time. Yet this tactile knowledge was useless if it died with the sailor who held it. For ocean travel to become a repeatable enterprise, not just a heroic gamble, this hard-won information had to be recorded and shared. This led to the creation of the first marine charts and sailing directions, the databases of the ancient world. In the Mediterranean, Greek and Roman mariners used documents called peripli, meaning sailings around. These were not maps as we know them, but written lists of ports, landmarks, distances, anchorages, and hazards, organized along a coastline. A periplus might read, sail east from the river mouth for 2 days until you see the white cliffs, then turn south, but beware the submerged rocks a mile offshore. They were verbal maps, a sequence of instructions born from collective experience. Meanwhile, in the vast Pacific, Polynesian navigators developed perhaps the most abstract and beautiful system of all, the stick chart. Constructed from flexible coconut frond midribs and cowrie shells, these were not literal maps to be held up to the landscape. The curved sticks represented the patterns and interference of ocean swells as they wrapped around and between islands. The cowrie shells marked the islands themselves. By feeling the pattern of the sticks and memorizing the chart, a navigator could learn to recognize how the sea itself would feel, how the waves would bounce and refract when an island was still over the horizon. It was a hydrodynamic map, encoding the behavior of the ocean into a portable, tactile memory aid. Both the periplus and the stick chart served the same vital purpose. They externalized memory. They allowed knowledge to be passed from master to apprentice, from one generation to the next, and from one culture to another through trade. They transformed individual discovery into collective wisdom, building a scaffold of known routes upon the unknown sea. A captain with a good chart or a memorized periplus was not sailing into the void. He was following in the wake of countless others, his path illuminated by their recorded trials and errors. These early information technologies did not just mitigate the risk of running aground, they mitigated the far greater risk of forgetting, ensuring that each perilous lesson learned at sea was not an ending, but a beginning for all who would follow. But a ship is more than the sum of its parts. It is a product of a mind. For generations, the knowledge of how to build one lived not in a book, but in the hands and eyes of a master shipwright. He would walk the forest, choosing a tree not just for its size, but for the natural curve of its trunk that might form a perfect stem or sternpost. Construction was an act of intuition, a dialogue between the craftsman, his tools, and the wood, guided by rules of thumb passed from father to son. This artisanal genius produced magnificent vessels, but it was slow, inconsistent, and vulnerable, for when the master died, his unique understanding could vanish with him. The next great breakthrough, therefore, was not a physical component, but an intellectual one, the engineering of the process itself. This was the move from intuitive craft to standardized design. Instead of each ship being a unique sculpture, shipwrights began developing proportional systems and modular measurements. A builder might decree that the ship's width would always be 1/3 of its length, or that the mast's height should be twice the keel's length. They used simple, repeatable units, like the space between a man's outstretched arms or a standard measuring rod, to ensure consistency. The ancient Romans took this a step further, leaving behind written specifications, like a contract for a ship to be built for the grain trade that detailed its exact dimensions, capacity, and even the type of wood to be used. This shift from art to applied science meant a ship built in one port would have the same seaworthy qualities as its sister built in another. It allowed for the efficient repair of vessels using pre-fashioned, interchangeable parts. The ultimate expression of this systematized thinking came centuries later with the Venetian arsenal, a massive, state-owned shipbuilding complex that operated like a pre-industrial assembly line. At its height in the 15th century, the arsenal could produce a fully equipped 100-ton galley in a single day. Raw materials would enter one gate, and as they moved through a coordinated sequence of specialized workshops, they would be transformed into standardized components, ribs, planks, rudders, all made to precise specifications before being assembled into a complete vessel at the dockside. This was mass production born from ancient principles of modular design. The profound consequence was scale. Standardized design enabled the reliable, rapid construction of entire navies and merchant fleets. A king could order 10 warships with confidence they would perform identically in battle, and a trading company could commission a dozen cargo vessels knowing each could carry the same profitable load. It transformed shipbuilding from a mystical craft into a repeatable, teachable, and strategically powerful industry. The true vessel being engineered was no longer just the ship, but the very system that could reliably create it, again and again, turning human ambition into a fleet. The wind could be a fickle and treacherous ally, falling silent for days on end or blowing from precisely the wrong direction. In these moments of calm or tactical necessity, ancient mariners turned to an engine far more reliable than any force of nature, the synchronized power of the human body. This was the domain of the oar, a system of propulsion that transformed a ship from a passive wind rider into an active, agile instrument of will. While sails provided the range for grand voyages, coordinated oar power offered something equally vital: absolute control. It allowed a vessel to move against the wind, to accelerate rapidly in battle, to navigate narrow straits, and to make precise landings on any beach. The engineering challenge was immense: how to efficiently translate the raw strength of dozens or even hundreds of rowers into smooth, forward motion without the oars tangling into a useless thicket. The solution lay in a masterpiece of ergonomic geometry. The first step was the oar port itself, a carefully shaped hole cut low in the ship's side, often lined with leather to keep out water and reduce wear. Directly above it, inside the hull, ran the rowing bench, positioned so a seated rower could drive the oar through the port with a full, powerful stroke. But to multiply this power, shipwrights had to think vertically. They developed multi-bank designs like the famed bireme with 2 levels of oars and the trireme with 3. This was not a simple matter of stacking rowers on top of each other. The benches were staggered in a sophisticated 3-dimensional arrangement. The oars of the uppermost bank emerged from ports highest on the hull, while the middle and lowest bank oars emerged from ports progressively lower and set further inboard. This created a fan of oars, each set operating in its own clear plane of motion. all dipping into the water at the same line along the ship's side. The rowers themselves were arranged in a diagonal grid, not directly behind one another, allowing each man the space to pull his oar without striking the man in front. On a trireme, the result was a symphony of coordinated effort, with 170 oars striking the water in unison, driven by the beat of a hortator's drum. This human engine was the ultimate tactical tool. In combat, it allowed a ship to execute complex maneuvers, ramming an enemy vessel with explosive force, then backing away before it could be boarded. It provided the burst of speed to catch a merchantman or escape a pursuer. More than that, it represented a peak of social engineering, the subordination of individual effort to a single, rhythmic purpose. The oar did not just move the ship, it embodied the collective discipline and endurance that made ancient naval power possible, a relentless mechanical heart beating within the wooden hull. The strength of a ship's hull ultimately depends on the strength of its connections. For thousands of years, the primary method of joinery was not metal but fiber. Across the ancient world, from the reed boats of Mesopotamia to the grand sewn plank vessels of the Indian Ocean, shipwrights used ropes made of hemp, coir, or palm fiber to literally stitch their ships together. This technique, known as lashing or sewing, involved drilling holes along the edges of planks and threading flexible ropes through them, pulling the timbers tight against an internal framework. It was a brilliant, organic solution that created a hull with a degree of flexibility, allowing it to absorb the shocks of waves without cracking. But this flexibility came with a cost. A lashed hull could work itself loose over time, the constant flexing causing the ropes to stretch and chafe. It limited the ultimate size and rigidity a ship could achieve, placing a ceiling on maritime ambition. The engineering leap that shattered that ceiling was the shift from flexible lashings to rigid metal fastenings. The introduction of copper and bronze nails represented a fundamental change in philosophy. Instead of a hull that could bend, shipwrights now sought to build a hull that would hold its shape against the sea's immense pressure. A metal nail driven through overlapping planks and clenched over on the inside, or a stout wooden dowel called a tree nail, driven through a pre-drilled hole, created a permanent, rigid bond. The planks became a single, unified shell. This was the technology that enabled the legendary Viking longships. Their clinker-built hulls, with planks overlapping like scales, were fastened with thousands of iron rivets. A blacksmith would heat an iron rod, drive it through a hole drilled through two overlapping planks and an internal rib, then place an iron rove, a small washer, over the point on the inside before hammering the end into a second head. This created an immensely strong clinch that held the entire structure together in a vise-like grip. The result was a hull of legendary resilience, lightweight yet incredibly tough, capable of riding the violent swells of the North Atlantic and flexing enough to not shatter upon impact. This shift in joinery was not merely an upgrade, it was a transformation of scale. Metal fastenings allowed for the construction of ships with deeper holds, taller masts, and broader beams. They distributed stress more evenly across the entire frame, enabling vessels to carry heavier cargoes and withstand the sustained pounding of ocean voyages that could last for months. The humble nail, often overlooked, was in fact a cornerstone of maritime expansion. It turned the concept of a large, rigid, ocean-going hull from a precarious dream into a repeatable, reliable reality, holding together not just planks of wood, but the very fabric of transoceanic trade and exploration. Metal fastenings could hold a hull together, but they could not keep the sea entirely outside it. Every ship, no matter how well built, would take on water. It seeped through seams that flexed in a swell, it crashed over the rail in a green wall during a gale, and it collected in the lowest part of the vessel, the bilge. Left unchecked, this accumulating weight would lower the ship deeper into the water, making it sluggish and unstable, until eventually it could simply founder, dragged down by the very element it was designed to conquer. The engineering response to this perpetual threat was not a single device, but a layered system of removal, a constant, quiet battle fought below the decks. The first and most relentless line of defense was the humble bucket, passed hand over hand in a human chain. This was bailing, a brute force exercise that could save a ship in a crisis but was unsustainable for long voyages. The true breakthrough was mechanizing this effort, turning human labor into mechanical advantage. This was the bilge pump. The simplest and most common design was the suction pump, a hollow wooden tube fitted with a leather flap valve at its lower end, which sat in the bilge water. A handle, operated by one or two sailors, drove a piston up and down inside the tube. On the upstroke, the piston created a vacuum that lifted water past the lower valve, and on the downstroke, a second valve in the piston itself opened, allowing the water to pass upward, only to be lifted again on the next cycle. With rhythmic pumping, a crew could lift water from the deepest, most inaccessible part of the hold and discharge it out through a side port back into the sea. The sound of a creaking pump handle became the anxious heartbeat of a ship in heavy weather, a direct measure of how well they were winning or losing the fight. But even the best pump could be overwhelmed if water was allowed to pool on the deck, adding dangerous top weight and washing away essential gear. Here, a subtle piece of hull design proved vital: the scupper. These were simple holes or channels cut through the bulwarks at deck level, often fitted with one-way flaps. When a wave washed across the deck, the water would naturally drain out through these scuppers, preventing it from accumulating and finding its way below. Managing this hydraulic chaos was a relentless, wet, and exhausting discipline. On a merchant cog crossing the North Sea or a caravel exploring the African coast, the efficiency of these systems was not about comfort, it was about existential arithmetic. The rate at which water could be removed had to exceed the rate at which it was coming in. A well-designed ship with an effective pump and clear scuppers could weather a storm that would doom a less prepared vessel. This unseen engineering, this network of tubes, valves, and drains, represented a profound acceptance. The ancient mariner knew they could not keep the ocean out completely, so they engineered a way to let it out faster than it could come in, turning their ship from a sealed container into a living, draining entity, forever engaged in a delicate negotiation with the deep. A ship could be a masterpiece of engineering, but it remained a fragile world adrift. Its true potential was only unlocked when it could connect to another world, a fixed point of safety and commerce on the shifting edge of the land. The vessel itself was only half the system, the other half was built from stone and sweat along the shoreline. This was the engineering of the harbor, the deliberate sculpting of the coast to create a sanctuary from the sea's chaos. A natural cove offered some protection, but for a maritime power, passive geography was not enough. They needed guaranteed safety, efficient transfer, and scale. This demanded land-based support engineering on a monumental level. The first and most vital structure was the breakwater, an artificial wall built out into the open water to blunt the force of waves and create a placid inner basin. At the Phoenician port of Carthage, engineers constructed massive moles, long arms of stone that reached into the Mediterranean, creating a protected circular harbor within. The inner harbor was reserved for the military fleet, a secure fortress within a fortress, while the outer commercial port buzzed with trade. The Romans perfected this art at ports like Ostia, the harbor of Rome, where they used a concrete that could cure underwater, allowing them to build foundations directly on the seabed and create piers and breakwaters of incredible durability. But a calm basin was useless if ships ran aground trying to enter it. This led to the science of dredging, the continuous removal of silt and sand to maintain clear, deep channels. Teams of laborers, or sometimes machines powered by animals or water wheels, would operate drag buckets or scoops to keep the vital arteries of the port open. ensuring that even the deepest drafted grain ships from Egypt could reach the quays of Alexandria. The quay itself was another marvel, a sturdy, elevated stone platform running along the waterfront. It provided a stable interface between the floating world and the solid one. Ships could moor alongside it, and cranes, often human-powered treadmills, could swing directly from the dock to the hold, loading and unloading cargo with a speed and efficiency impossible from a beach. Behind these quays rose the warehouses, the Horia of Ostia or the great granaries of Alexandria. These were vast, fire-resistant buildings with raised floors for ventilation, where the wealth of empires, from Egyptian grain to Spanish olive oil, Asian spices to African ivory, could be stored, catalogued, and taxed. A great port was a machine for transference, a kinetic node where the rhythm of the sea met the order of the land. It was a statement of intent. By investing years and vast resources to move mountains of stone and earth, a civilization declared that its future was not inward but outward across the waves. These harbors were not just shelters, they were the anchors of entire maritime economies, the engineered homes that made the lonely courage of the open ocean not just possible but profoundly worthwhile. A harbor full of ships is a promise, but only if their holds can be filled and emptied with speed. Every day spent at the dock was a day of lost revenue and mounting risk from weather or piracy, so the economics of maritime trade demanded a relentless focus on logistics. This led to a suite of onboard and dockside engineering solutions dedicated to one simple goal: moving cargo from land to sea and back again, as quickly and safely as possible. The design of the ship itself began to reflect this priority. The open hull of a simple trading vessel gave way to a more organized space. Builders began installing permanent decks, creating multiple levels for storage, and separating cargo from the crew's living quarters below. To access these deep holds, they engineered cargo hatches, large, reinforced openings in the deck fitted with strong, removable covers. These hatches were positioned directly above the main storage areas, allowing goods to be lowered straight down in a direct vertical line, the most efficient path possible. For bulk goods like grain or salt, internal compartments could be created with temporary wooden partitions, preventing the cargo from shifting dangerously during a voyage, a lesson learned from ships that had capsized when a loose load slid to one side in a heavy swell. But the true innovation in speed came not from the ship, but from the interface between the ship and the shore. The invention of the dockside crane transformed manual labor into a feat of mechanical strength. The most common design was the human-powered treadmill crane. A large wooden wheel, like a giant hamster wheel, was mounted within a sturdy wooden frame. Men would walk inside the wheel, their collective weight and motion rotating it. This rotation turned a central axle, which wound a heavy rope around a drum, lifting a load suspended from the crane's projecting jib. The mechanical advantage was staggering. A small team walking in a treadmill could lift a stone block or a pallet of amphory weighing several tons, swinging it smoothly from the quayside over the ship's rail and down through the open hatch into the waiting hold below. The reverse process for unloading was just as swift. This system was not just about raw power, it was about precision and safety. Delicate amphory filled with expensive wine or oil, heavy sacks of grain, even exotic animals in cages, could all be transferred without the breakage and chaos of man-handling them up and down slippery planks. The efficiency ripple effect was enormous. A merchant ship like a Roman corbitor could be turned around in a fraction of the time, allowing it to complete more voyages in a trading season. Ports like Alexandria or Piraeus became humming engines of commerce, where the rhythmic creak of crane wheels and the calls of stevedores formed the soundtrack of empire. The crane and the thoughtful design of cargo holds did more than move goods. They accelerated the very pulse of the ancient world, making the reliable, large-scale exchange of materials across the sea not just a possibility, but a profitable, everyday reality. The relentless pursuit of maritime efficiency also forged a parallel path, one of calculated power and survival. For every merchant vessel built to carry goods, another was engineered to dominate the sea lanes, to protect those goods or to seize them. This was the realm of naval architecture, where the same principles of hull design and propulsion were redirected toward a singular, stark purpose: command of the water itself. The most iconic symbol of this intent was the bronze-sheathed ram, a weapon that turned the ship's own momentum into a devastating force. Mounted on the prow just below the waterline, the ram was not a blunt instrument, but a sophisticated piece of hydrodynamic engineering. Crafted from heavy timber and clad in sharpened bronze, its shape was designed to slice through the water with minimal drag, concentrating the entire kinetic energy of a charging galley into a single, piercing point. Upon impact, the goal was not to sink the enemy vessel outright, but to cripple it, splintering its hull timbers below the waterline and rendering it immobile and taking on water, a helpless prize. The construction of the ram was integral to the ship's own structure, heavily reinforced with internal bracing to ensure the shock of collision did not shatter the attacker's own bow. This weapon demanded a specific kind of ship, one built for speed and agility, leading directly to the multi-banked oar systems of the Greek trireme or the Roman quinquereme, vessels that could accelerate rapidly to deliver a fatal strike. But the ram was only the opening move. Once ships closed, combat became a close-quarters struggle of boarding parties and projectile fire. To dominate this chaotic phase, naval architects raised the high ground, literally. They constructed elevated fighting platforms at the bow and stern, known as forecastles and aftcastles. These were not permanent structures on early galleys, but often temporary wooden towers that could be assembled before battle. They provided archers and javelineers a commanding field of fire down onto the enemy deck, turning the ship's ends into strongholds. Later, on the high-sided cog and carrack of the medieval period, these castles became integrated, fortified parts of the superstructure with crenellated walls and protected firing positions, making a ship a floating castle in truth. Defense was as crucial as offense. To protect the vulnerable rowers and soldiers from incoming arrows and stones, ships were fitted with protective panels of hide or wood along the gunwales, known as pavises. Some warships, like those of later centuries, experimented with hulls sheathing not for worm protection, but for armor, layering extra planks or even thin sheets of metal around vital areas to resist cannon fire or Greek fire. These features, from the piercing ram to the towering castles, represented a complete reimagining of the ship's function. No longer just a vehicle for travel or trade, it was engineered as a mobile siege engine and a fortified platform, a sovereign extension of state power onto the waves. This martial evolution proved that the ocean was not just a highway for commerce, but also a theater of conflict, where the same genius that built bridges across the deep could also build engines to control them. The most sophisticated ship could still be broken by a single, unseasonal storm. For ancient mariners, the final and perhaps most vital piece of engineering was not built from wood or metal, but from generations of careful observation, a deep and intimate knowledge of the sky and sea themselves. This was the applied science of weather patterns and seasonal timing, an intellectual capital as critical to survival as a sturdy hull or a reliable rudder. They learned that the ocean was not a random chaos, but a system with rhythms, a great breathing entity with predictable pulses. The most dramatic of these pulses were the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean. For half the year, the winds blow steadily from the southwest, drenching the Indian subcontinent with rain. For the other half, they reverse, flowing from the northeast. Arab, Indian, and later Swahili traders did not fight this cycle. They engineered their entire commercial calendar around it. a merchant would load his dhow with goods in Oman as the northeast monsoon began, knowing it would carry him swiftly to the Malabar coast of India. He would then spend months trading, waiting for the winds to shift, and then catch the southwest monsoon back home, a reliable, round-trip highway written in the air. In the Mediterranean, Greek and Roman sailors relied on the annual meltemi, or Artesian winds, steady northerlies that blew throughout the summer sailing season, providing a predictable tailwind for voyages from the Aegean south to Egypt. This knowledge was not casual folklore. It was precise, codified, and often closely guarded commercial intelligence. It transformed voyage planning from a gamble into a calculated schedule. Setting sail against the monsoon was not just slower, it was often suicidal, a battle against winds and waves that could exhaust a crew and destroy a ship. By aligning human ambition with these planetary cycles, mariners effectively engineered a form of environmental leverage, using the Earth's own atmospheric engine to power their journeys. This wisdom was passed down in pilot guides, in songs, and in the oral traditions of master navigators who could read the subtle signs, a certain halo around the moon, the behavior of birds, the texture of clouds, to forecast weather hours or even days ahead. This accumulated experience meant that a captain's most valuable tool was often the almanac in his mind, a calendar of the sky that told him not just how to sail, but more importantly, when. The successful voyage, therefore, was a symphony of engineering where the human-made ship met the natural rhythm of the world in a moment of perfect, pre-arranged harmony. Yet the wind does not always blow from behind you. For a vessel bound by the simple physics of a square sail, a headwind was a prison, a wall of moving air that could trap a ship in port for weeks or force it onto a lee shore with no escape. The final and perhaps most elegant breakthrough in sail technology was not about catching more wind, but about redefining the very relationship between wind and hull. This was the aerodynamic revolution of the lateen sail, a design that turned a ship from a passive recipient of the breeze into an active wing, capable of sailing almost directly into the wind's teeth. The lateen is instantly recognizable by its dramatic, triangular shape, a long, sloping yardarm mounted at a sharp angle to a shorter mast. Unlike a square sail that billows out like a parachute to be pushed from behind, the lateen is set fore and aft along the line of the keel. When trimmed correctly, its triangular cloth acts like the wing of an airplane, creating a difference in pressure. The wind flows faster over the curved leeward side, creating lift, a forward pulling force that literally sucks the vessel ahead. This principle, called aerodynamic lift, allowed a ship to sail at an angle as close as 60 degrees to the direction of the wind, a maneuver known as beating or tacking. By sailing a zigzag course first at an angle to the wind on one side, then turning to sail at an angle on the other, a lateen-rigged vessel could make steady progress directly upwind, a feat impossible for any square rigger. The implications were nothing short of liberating. A trader in the Mediterranean no longer had to wait for a favorable easterly to sail from Egypt to Rome. He could set out against a westerly and work his way there methodically. In the Indian Ocean, the agile dhow with its lateen rig could navigate the complex, shifting breezes along the coast, exploring inlets and harbors that were inaccessible to ships needing a straight tailwind. This was not just about new routes, it was about new strategies and new confidence. A captain could now sail out of a harbor against the wind, knowing he could also sail back in against it. He could maneuver in battle with a precision that left heavier square riggers drifting helplessly. The adoption of the lateen, spreading from the Indian Ocean to the Arab world and then to the Mediterranean, represented the culmination of millennia of maritime engineering. It was the moment the sail ceased to be a simple engine and became a true instrument of navigation, granting the ancient mariner a final, crucial measure of freedom from the whims of the world they dared to cross. But this mastery of wind and wood reveals a deeper truth about the ancient shipwrights' craft. They were not just carpenters, they were the world's first material scientists, conducting a grand experiment in composite engineering long before the term existed. Their genius lay not in a single perfect substance, but in a sophisticated understanding of how to blend the unique strengths of different materials into a single, resilient whole. The primary structure was always wood, chosen with astonishing specificity. Oak for its toughness in hull planks, flexible spruce for masts, rot-resistant cedar for decks, each timber selected for its natural properties to meet a precise mechanical demand. Into this wooden skeleton, they integrated metal for points of supreme stress. Bronze and later iron were forged into nails, bolts, and rudder fittings, providing rigid, permanent fastenings where flexibility would mean failure. Yet for all its strength, metal was brittle and could fatigue under constant vibration, so it was used sparingly, strategically, like the bones in a body. The connective tissue of the ship, however, came from the plant kingdom. Hemp and coir ropes woven with immense skill formed the rigging that had to be both incredibly strong and supple enough to run through blocks. These same plant fibers, often mixed with pine tar, were hammered into seams as caulking, creating a waterproof seal that could swell and tighten with the hull's movement. For the great wings that caught the wind, they turned to the animal world. Sails were woven from flax or, in later centuries, heavy wool, and then treated with oils to repel water. Leather was everywhere, protecting oar ports from wear, serving as hinges and binding tools, and holding this entire organic machine together against the sea's relentless intrusion were the sealants, the tars, pitches, and waxes. Pine resin was heated into sticky pitch to waterproof hulls and preserve ropes. Beeswax might be mixed with oils to dress sails or lubricate moving parts. In the Pacific, islanders used breadfruit sap or other tree resins as all-purpose marine glue. This holistic approach created vessels that were not just strong, but also inherently repairable. A shattered plank could be replaced with local timber, a torn sail patched with new cloth, a worn rope re-spliced with fresh fiber. A ship far from home was not a fragile artifact. It was a living kit of parts, adaptable to the resources of any coastline it might encounter. This is why a Viking longship from Norway and a Javanese jong from Southeast Asia, though worlds apart, share this fundamental engineering philosophy. They are both triumphant composites, born from a deep dialogue between human need and the material gifts of their specific world, woven together into a form capable of defying the deepest ocean. These 20 breakthroughs form a single, magnificent system. Each innovation, from the keel to the lateen sail, was not an isolated miracle, but a deliberate answer to a specific, brutal question posed by the sea. They built upon one another in a quiet conversation across centuries and continents. The waterproofed hull made the deep cargo hold possible. The deep hold demanded better ballast management, and the heavy, laden ship required the precise control of the Stern-Post Rudder. The multi-masted rig could not exist without the strong joinery of metal fastenings, and none of it mattered without the celestial knowledge to chart a course home. This was engineering in its purest form, a distributed network of ingenuity where cultures on opposite sides of the globe, working with different materials and facing different oceans, arrived at elegantly parallel solutions to the same universal problems. Their legacy is not locked in the past. The hydrodynamic principles that shaped the Viking longship inform the design of modern container vessels. The aerodynamic lift of the lateen sail is the same physics that powers the wings of America's Cup racing yachts. The systematic observation of stars and weather patterns established the foundation for all modern navigation. We still build upon the scaffold they created. This story, then, is more than a list of ancient tools. It is a testament to a profound and resilient curiosity, a collective refusal to be bound by the horizon. It speaks to a time when the greatest challenges were met not with microchips, but with mindfulness, with a deep reading of wood, wind, and wave. Which of these 20 interconnected breakthroughs do you find the most compelling? Share your thoughts below, and if you're eager for more stories of ancient ingenuity, be sure to explore our other journeys into the past.